There is a cost no one talks about. A tax on your peace, a silent drain on your energy. It happens not with big sacrifices, but in the small ways you abandon yourself. Every time you answer when you're tired. Every time you say yes just to avoid conflict. Every time you stay longer than your heart can bear. That's the real exhaustion. Not the tasks, but the pretending. Pretending you're okay. Pretending you don't need rest. Pretending you're not slowly disappearing. This kind of exhaustion doesn't happen overnight. It builds quietly. When your availability becomes your identity, you are the reliable one, the one who always picks up, the one who never complains, the one who makes space for everyone but yourself. And the world rewards you for it. They call you kind, strong, selfless, but inside, you're vanishing. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how can you become who you are if you're always busy becoming what others need? That's where detachment comes in, not as revenge, not as bitterness, but as reclamation. It's the moment you whisper, "I'm allowed to be unavailable," because here's the truth. Being always available doesn't make you more lovable. It makes you easier to take for granted. People don't always intend to, but they will. If you never set a boundary, you become the endless well, the open door, the default option. But a well that never replenishes eventually runs dry. Let me tell you about Maya. She was the type of woman who always answered every call, every text, even when she was in the middle of dinner, even when she was falling asleep, even when she was crying quietly in the bathroom. She thought love meant showing up, no matter what. She thought being needed was the same as being wanted, until one day, her body made the decision for her. She collapsed at work. The diagnosis, burnout. But what she really suffered from was boundary starvation. In recovery, she did something radical. She turned off her phone after 8 p.m. She stopped replying to messages immediately. She started asking herself, "Do I actually have the energy for this?" And at first, it felt like betrayal, like she was letting people down. But soon, it began to feel like oxygen, like coming back home to herself. And something unexpected happened. The people who truly loved her didn't leave. They adjusted. They respected. Because when you change how you treat yourself, you teach others how to treat you. This is the secret. Your presence should not be an obligation. It should be a gift. And like any gift, it should be given with intention, not guilt. So if you feel tired all the time, ask yourself this: am I tired because I'm doing too much? Or because I'm holding too little of myself? Emotional detachment is not the absence of care. It's the presence of clarity. It says, I am still loving, but I am no longer self-abandoning. When you detach from the expectation to always be available, you create space for your true self to emerge. You stop living as a reaction and start living as a choice, because you are not a support system. You are a soul, and you deserve to exist for more than just being convenient. Maya learned that lesson. So can you. Because the moment you start choosing yourself is the moment you stop apologizing for your needs. And that is the beginning of becoming who you truly are. The human mind is powerful, but it is also obsessive. It wants to solve, to fix, to understand everything, even when there's nothing left to understand. This is the root of overthinking, not wisdom, but fear. The fear of not knowing, the fear of being unprepared, the fear of being forgotten. So your mind loops again and again and again, running simulations of conversations that already happened, replaying messages that were never sent, analyzing silences as if they contain hidden codes. And the worst part? You think this is helping. You think that if you just think harder, you'll finally feel better. But that's the lie. The more you think, the further you drift from peace. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Overthinking is your unconscious fear. wearing the mask of logic. It tells you, if I replay this moment one more time, maybe I'll find something I missed. But peace doesn't come from more analysis. It comes from release. Let me tell you about Diego. He dated someone who left without closure. No goodbye. No explanation. Just silence. And in that silence, Diego created a world of explanations. Maybe she was scared. Maybe she found someone new. Maybe he did something wrong and didn't realize it. He replayed every moment, every detail, every laugh, every delay in her replies, trying to piece together a puzzle with missing pieces. For 6 months, he lived inside his mind, convinced that thinking was healing. But all it did was exhaust him, because thinking is not healing. It's hiding. Hiding from the truth that some things don't have answers. Some people don't come back. And some closure is something you give yourself. It wasn't until Diego detached, not from the memory, but from the need to understand it, that peace found him again. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop obsessing. You stop using your thoughts as a substitute for action or for acceptance. You begin to say, I don't need to solve this to move forward, because healing doesn't always come with clarity. Sometimes it comes with surrender. And here's the paradox. The moment you detach is the moment your mind stops spinning, because the mind doesn't know what to do with silence, but the soul thrives in it. When you stop filling the quiet with theories, you start hearing your intuition, that gentle voice beneath the noise, the one that says, you are safe even when you don't understand everything. You are whole even when someone left without saying why. Anxiety wants urgency. Peace wants space. Overthinking wants to chase. Detachment wants to breathe. So if you're tired of your own thoughts, step back. Breathe deeper. Let the thoughts pass. They are not commands. They are clouds. They are weather. And you are the sky. You were not born to live in your head. You were born to feel the earth under your feet, the wind on your face, the stillness in your chest. You don't need to figure it all out. You need to come home to yourself. And sometimes, coming home looks like this: turning off your phone, closing the browser tab, leaving the question unanswered, because not everything needs a conclusion. Some things just need to end. And when you allow that, you're not being passive, you're being free. Overthinking is fear trying to protect you, but detachment is trust in disguise. Trust that you will survive this. Trust that you will heal, even without the full story, because real peace isn't found in perfect understanding. It's found in the moment you stop demanding it. So ask yourself, what would it look like to let go before you fully understand? That question, that pause, might just be the beginning of your peace. Discipline is a beautiful word, but in the wrong hands, it becomes a weapon. We were taught that discipline means control, that you must wake up earlier, push harder, sacrifice more, no matter how tired you are, no matter how empty you feel. But discipline without awareness becomes self-punishment. You're no longer growing, you're performing. You're no longer honoring your potential. You're silencing your needs. There is a quiet difference between control and direction. Control says, you must do this or you're a failure. Direction says, I choose this because it aligns with who I'm becoming. Carl Jung said, I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. And yet, most of us use discipline as a way to run from what happened to us. We overwork to escape our unworthiness. We overtrain to punish our softness. We overcommit to avoid feeling unwanted. That's not discipline. That's fear wearing a suit. True discipline comes from detachment, from stepping back and asking, why am I doing this? Who am I trying to impress? Is this action aligned with my values or my wound? Let me tell you about Amina, a young woman who believed that if she didn't push herself, she would never succeed. She never rested, never said no, never allowed herself softness, because she had been told that softness was weakness. She was praised for being a high achiever, but what no one saw was how she cried herself to sleep every night, terrified of being lazy, terrified of being forgotten. She thought discipline meant proving her worth, until one day, she burned out, not physically, emotionally. She couldn't feel joy. She couldn't celebrate anything she achieved, because everything she did came from fear, not freedom. In recovery, she learned something profound. Discipline was never meant to be rigid. It was meant to be rooted, not in shame, but in vision. She started doing less, but with more purpose. She worked out because she loved her body, not because she hated it. She set goals because she wanted to grow, not because she feared falling behind. And everything changed because she was no longer acting from fear. She was moving with intention. This is the power of emotional detachment. It allows you to see the difference between what is yours and what was placed on you. Discipline is not the same as depletion. You can be focused without being frantic. You can be committed without being cruel to yourself. Detachment says, I don't have to suffer to be worthy. I don't have to earn rest with pain. I can move forward without burning out. In the Stoic philosophy, discipline is not about emotionlessness. It's about emotional wisdom, knowing when to act, when to pause, and when to let go. You don't have to do everything. You have to do what matters. And what matters is that you don't abandon yourself in the name of becoming someone else. So many people confuse discipline with perfection, but the truth is, perfection is the enemy of growth. Discipline without compassion creates machines, not humans. So ask yourself, are you using discipline as a mask? To hide your fear of being judged, your fear of not being enough, your fear of failure? Or are you using it as a compass? To return to yourself, to build your vision, to move forward, without losing your center. Amina's story is not rare. It's the story of millions who wake up every day, trapped in routines they never chose, addicted to achievement, but starved of fulfillment. Detachment is the moment you step back and ask, is this discipline making me stronger, or just harder to feel? You were not born to be a machine. You were born to be awake, to grow with awareness, to act with alignment, to rest with no guilt, to rise with no resentment. True strength is not in how much you can carry, but in how clearly you can choose what to carry. So yes, be disciplined, be intentional, be committed to your path, but don't confuse that with being disconnected from your soul, because the woman who detaches from the pressure to be everything finally has space to become herself, and that is the highest form of direction there is. There's a moment in every people-pleaser's life when they look in the mirror and don't recognize themselves. You're exhausted, you're agreeable, you're smiling, but it feels fake because deep down, you're not living your truth. You're living in response to other people's comfort. You shapeshift, you bend, you soften your voice, you laugh at jokes you hate. You say yes when everything in your chest says no, not because you're weak, but because you learned that love had to be earned, that attention had to be bought, that belonging was conditional. And so, you became what they liked, what they expected, what they wanted, but at what cost? Carl Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Because when you stop living for others, you confront who you really are, and more importantly, who you've been hiding all this time. That's where detachment becomes your medicine. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop negotiating your worth. It means you stop handing out pieces of yourself in exchange for crumbs of validation. Let me tell you about Clara. For most of her life, Clara was the nice girl, the one everyone could count on, always helping, always saying, it's okay, even when it wasn't. She had a boyfriend who never really committed, friends who only called when they needed her, family who expected her to carry the emotional weight. She told herself this was love, that being needed meant being valued. But she was wrong. One night, Clara was crying in the parking lot of a grocery store, not because something terrible happened, but because nothing had changed, and that broke her more than anything. She was doing everything right, and still felt invisible. And in that moment, she realized something terrifying. She didn't know what she actually wanted, because she never gave herself permission to want. The next morning, she did one small thing. She turned off her phone notifications, not because she was angry, but because she was tired. Tired of being available to everyone except herself. And it started there. One small act of detachment that grew into a life transformation. She started asking, what do I like? What do I feel? What do I need? And guess what? Not everyone liked the new Clara. Some friends drifted. Her boyfriend said she was changing, but she wasn't changing. She was returning to herself. People-pleasing is just emotional survival in disguise. But survival is not living. Detachment is the moment you say, I will no longer betray myself to be accepted by people who don't even know the real me. You stop trying to be chosen, and you start choosing yourself. You stop asking, what do they think of me? And you start asking, what do I think of myself? There is no peace in people-pleasing, only quiet resentment, only soft rage, only a slow fading of your own light. You are not meant to dim. You are meant to shine, even if that light makes others uncomfortable. The truth is, some people only love you when you're easy, when you're small, when you don't ask for too much. But the right people love you when you say no, when you draw boundaries, when you stand your ground. And you'll never meet those people if you're too busy being someone you're not. Detachment gives you the space to break the habit of apology, to stop saying, sorry for needing, sorry for existing, sorry for being too much. You were never too much. You were just with people who couldn't handle your truth. So detach, not to punish, but to protect your time, your energy, your soul. Start pleasing your soul, not your wounds, not their expectations, not your fear of being alone, because solitude with truth is better than connection built on lies. And yes, there will be loss. When you stop pleasing, you will lose people, but what you gain is yourself. And when you are finally you, fully, unapologetically, you become magnetic, not because you try, but because you don't. You don't chase, you don't beg, you don't adapt. You simply exist in your truth, and let those who resonate find you. So ask yourself, who am I when I'm not trying to be liked? And who would I become if I finally stopped apologizing for being me? There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, feels full, full of truth, full of peace, full of self. That's the silence that comes after you stop chasing, after you stop explaining, after you stop proving. It's not the silence of giving up. It's the silence of finally choosing yourself. Because one day, you wake up and realize you haven't thought about them. Not in the same way. Not with that ache. Not with that question of, do they still think of me? Because it no longer matters. Not because you're numb, but because you've remembered your worth. You're not waiting to be found. You're not longing to be chosen. You've already chosen. Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And the truth is, you can't become who you truly are while living in the reflection of someone else's gaze. You can't grow in a room where you're constantly shrinking. You can't be free if you're still waiting for their permission to breathe. Detachment is not a loss. It's a return to your center, a return to the part of you that was never meant to be handed away. You don't need to be missed to be meaningful. You don't need to be remembered to matter. You are not valuable because someone sees you. You are valuable because you exist. Let me tell you about Sophia. She spent 3 years in a relationship where she was always the one trying, the one calling, the one explaining, the one forgiving. And when it ended, It wasn't with a scream. It was with silence. He stopped answering, stopped caring, and for a long time, Sophia believed she had failed. She asked herself, was I not enough? Did I do too much? Did I love him wrong? But one day, she stopped asking, not because she had the answers, but because she no longer needed them. She didn't block him. She didn't chase him. She didn't write the long message. She simply lived. She went back to yoga. She changed her apartment. She started writing again. And in doing all of that, she rediscovered something priceless. Her own voice, her own rhythm, her own joy. Months later, he reached out, said he missed her, said he regretted everything. But the difference was, Sophia wasn't the same woman anymore. She didn't need to be remembered, because she hadn't forgotten herself. And that is what detachment gives you. Not a reaction, but a resurrection. The woman you were, before you forgot your worth, before you gave your peace away, before you begged for love in places that only offered confusion. Now, you walk differently. You speak with presence. You say no without guilt. You leave the room when it no longer feels aligned. And maybe you're alone, but you're not lonely, because being in your own presence finally feels like home. You stopped looking for closure, because your life is already opening. You stopped needing revenge, because peace is enough. You stopped waiting, because you're walking with intention, with softness, with sovereignty. And that is power. The kind of power that doesn't scream, doesn't chase, doesn't prove. It just radiates, and that power is yours, with or without them. So here's the truth. Not every man will miss you. Not every friend will return. Not every person will realize what they lost. But you will realize what you gained. A self that doesn't beg. A soul that doesn't shrink. A presence that doesn't apologize. You become not a better version of who they wanted, but the purest version of who you were meant to be. Not because you changed, but because you came home. So if you've ever been told you're too much, too distant, too quiet, too cold, smile, because they were right. You've become too much for a world that feeds on dependence, and just enough for a life built on freedom. You don't chase anymore. You don't wait anymore. You don't break for anyone who won't bend for you, because now you know the only approval that matters is the one you give yourself. And that is how you become who you truly are.